Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I am your host, Lonnie Jones. My wife Jackie and I moved to the city of Huntsville in 1986 for me to be a youth and family minister. I have been a minister since 1980. I have served in this community as a police chaplain assigned to a SWAT team since 1992, and I've been in private practice as a licensed professional counselor since 1998. I'm also an adventure educator and an avid outdoorsman. I dabble in rock climbing and I goof around with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Our life has been full of many wonderful experiences and some just outright adventures. I used to write about those things in a little church bulletin article. So now instead of asking you to read those things, we're just going to talk about them in our podcast. And as we talk about them, we're going to talk about the facts. The facts lead to concepts, and the concepts lead to application. One caveat about the facts is, for the most part, we're going to tell you the facts just as they happened. But every now and then, we're going to tell you the way other people have told us they remember it happening with a little bit of embellishment. It's all good, clean fun and for educational purposes. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy Keeping Up with Jones. Faulkner University announces a 60% tuition discount for members of the Church of Christ. Now, there are some guidelines. This 60% tuition reduction is applicable to adult undergraduate Bible degrees or graduate Bible degrees from the Curley Graduate School of Theology in the VP Black College of Biblical Studies. You must satisfy all admission requirements and maintain satisfactory academic progress. You must remain continuously enrolled, including summers, until the completion of the degree. You must provide a letter from an elder or minister, preferably on church letterhead, verifying that you're an active member of a Church of Christ congregation prior to your initial enrollment. This offer applies to adult undergraduate degrees such as biblical studies, youth and family ministry tracks, and it also includes graduate degrees. Those are the Master of Arts in Biblical Studies, the Master of Arts in Family Life Ministry, or a Master of Theology, and it also applies to the PhD in Biblical Studies. For undergraduate inquiries, please contact Adult Enrollment 334-386-7140, 334-386-7140, or Adult Enrollment at Faulkner edu. That is Adult Enrollment at faulkner.edu. For graduate inquiries, please call 334-386-7539, 334-386-7539. Graduate enrollment at faulkner.edu. That is graduate enrollment at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. TKM Incorporated in Moss, Tennessee is a construction company that specializes in erosion control, seeding, and soil, hydroseeding, hydromulch, minor excavation, and silt fence. They also provide traffic control and construction signs. Their business is keeping people safe, but their passion, their mission, is they wish that all men could be saved. TKM has adopted the nickname the King's Men because as they serve you, they also serve the King. If they could provide any of their services for you, please contact them at 931-243-3958. That is 931-243-3958. Or you can contact them on the net at tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. That is tkminc2001 at twlakes.net. TKM Incorporated is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I knelt in the snow and I firmly attached the bindings to my feet and ratcheted down the straps. The thing I was securing to my feet was a 141 centimeter Solomon Salomon, Solomon Snowboard, not to be confused with the wise king of the Old Testament, because what I was doing was probably not wise. I was attempting to make the cover of Old Dog's New Tricks magazine, and exactly 2 months before my 40th birthday, I was in the Colorado Rockies learning to snowboard. Now, I'd been introduced to snowboarding. I've been introduced to snowboarding in Snowshoe, West Virginia. I'd actually gotten my feet wet or cold, as the case may be, on this little 2-day trip where I was going to learn the basics of snowboarding. I'd learned the theory of snowboarding in July in the lobby of a dormitory at a college in Tennessee. My friend Tim Orberson was going to teach me how to snowboard. Now, he'd been a lifelong skier, and he suddenly one day on a trip just decided, hey, I'm going to ditch the skis and learn to ride a snowboard. And he said he took him 3 days of falling down the mountain to learn to stand up on the thing. But he said, once you do it, it's unlike anything you've ever done. So we're standing in this dormitory, and he says, okay, so if you're riding a snowboard and you're standing on the board, and what happens when you ride skis is your feet point the same direction as the skis. But on a snowboard, you're perpendicular to the board. So if the board is pointed north-south, your feet are pointed east-west. And he said, so you stand on this board, and I ride goofy-footed, so that means I ride with my right foot going down the hill. He said, now if you're standing on this board and you take your right foot and you point your toes down, and you take your left foot and you point your heels down, you flex the board and you'll do a forward-facing turn. If you do the opposite, the heel of your right foot goes down and the toes of your left foot go down, you'll make a backwards-facing turn, and that's how you drive a snowboard. Now, in order to learn to do this, you've got to practice 2 skills. One is called toe siding, and the other is called heel siding. And so you get on a ski slope, and you strap your board on, and you put your toes facing the mountain, and you drift down the mountain in a left to right pattern until you run out of energy, and then you drift the opposite way and you go back right to left, and you're making these really small arcs, left to right, right to left, left to right, right to left, and you never change your orientation. Your toes are always pointed at the mountain. That's called toe siding. And then you go back up the top of the slope and you learn to ride this thing with just your heels. And so your heels are facing the mountain, and you float left to right, right to left, left to right, right to left. And when you can do that successfully, when you can toe side successfully and you can heel side successfully, then you learn to connect. You learn to twist your board and move your body, and you connect the heel side and the toe side. And that's when you're riding a snowboard. That's when you can, quote unquote, carve. Some of the cool guys out in Colorado, using that lingo that they use, call it shredding the gnar. When we made our trip out to Colorado, we were all going to leave on a Sunday afternoon after worship services. And my friend Kyle Traylor had been called upon to pray. And so Kyle's in the pulpit and he's praying his Lord. In a few hours, some of the gentlemen from this congregation are going to go out into the mountains for some fellowship and some recreation. And Lord, be with those guys while they're shredding the gnar. I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody ask God to bless us while we shred the gnar. But anyway, I got an introduction to the snowshoe falling leaf pattern, and I learned the theory at the dormitory in the summer, and now here it is. It's 2 months before I turn 40, and I'm in the mountains of Colorado, and I'm going to learn to shred the gnar. I'm going to learn to connect my toe side and my heel side. To complete this picture, you got to understand that my friends had said, now you need to wear stuff for these cold conditions. You need to have something that's windproof and waterproof. These guys had all been lifelong skiers. They've been skiing since they were kids. They had the proper gear. Well, my windproof, waterproof stuff is mossy oak camouflage. So here I am in the snow with my friends, and I'm covered from my snow boots up to the top of my little head in full camouflage, and then I'm wearing the snow goggles. Nobody can tell I'm from Alabama, and I'm wandering around through the snow here. The redneck snow ninja is trying to learn to ride this thing down the mountain. Learning to snowboard, the theory is one thing, the application is another. Because when it comes down to the application of actually riding a snowboard, to me, it was counterintuitive. See, I'd ridden a skateboard, and I learned how to water ski. But the counterintuitive nature of snowboarding is that the faster you go, the more control you have. And that didn't make sense to me. I would think the slower you go, the more control you have. But Tim explained it kind of works like an airplane wing. You get that speed going over that surface, and then it's more responsive to your movements. Well, think about trying to balance a bicycle that's not moving. Just sit on the bicycle and try to balance it versus balancing a bicycle that's under speed or under where you're moving. Well, that makes sense to me. The other part of snowboarding that's counterintuitive is that you have to lean over the board. You see, if you get on the board and you do like you do water skis and you kind of lean back, it'll just slip out from under you. The other part of the snowboarding is that if you put your, lean forward on both your toes, you're not going to go anywhere, you're just going to turn. And so learning to ride this thing to me was counterintuitive. And the other part of it that was counterintuitive is how fast you can fall. The only time I've ever been hit that hard is learning to barefoot water ski. Barefoot water skiing and snowboarding violate the rules of quantum, or they violate the rules of physics. They involve quantum physics. You're standing and then you're lying down. You're standing and you've been slapped by the lake. You're standing, you've been slapped by the mountain, and you really didn't pass between the points of space and time. You're just there and then you're not. You just impact, and it's brutal. When you're snowboarding, whatever foot has the most weight on it will drift to the front. Now, if you're going down the hill and you put weight on your foot and it drifts to the front forward, you catch the front edge of your snowboard, you'll fall on your face. And you kind of see the mountain coming up to headbutt you. But if you're drifting down that mountain and you put weight on your foot and it drifts behind you and you catch that backward, you catch the hillside edge, you just wake up. You wake up staring at a cobalt blue sky, but at the same time you see stars, and then somebody asks you, hey, how many fingers am I holding up? And you Thursday, because, man, I learned two things in Snowshoe, West Virginia. I learned to connect my heel side and my toe side, and I learned to wear a helmet. Learning to ride a snowboard is really about learning to let go. You see, you really don't control the board. You just simply ride the board. You're not going to do anything that overcomes the power of gravity. You just use gravity in your favor. You're not going to overcome the slope of the mountain. I guess you could, run down a super, super steep hill and have enough energy and momentum to run back up another hill. But for the most part, snowboarders don't go uphill very well. They just go downhill. That's what they're designed to do. And learning that the more speed I have, the more control I have. It felt to me like what they were telling me was, in order to be in control, you've got to be out of control. Luke, just let go. Use the force. Is kind of what it sounded like to me. And so getting on this thing and leaning over it rather than leaning away from it like I did, water skiing or even skateboarding a little bit, I had some things I had to overcome. But once you overcome it, and once you make that first really smooth run down the mountain, I was hooked. As a kid, I would have these dreams where I could fly. Once I rode a snowboard, once I learned to ride a snowboard, I've never dreamed I could fly again. I dream about snowboarding, but I've never had another dream about the ability to fly, because snowboarding to me was the closest thing to floating and levitating and moving across the ground that I'd ever accomplished. Snowboarding gets about as close to flying as you can get. The trees float by you. There's no exertion. There's only exhilaration. It's the only kind of freedom you can find by letting go. You see, climbing is about putting weight on your feet or on your hands and having all your weight line up on a single point. The guys who are really, really good at that are exceptional climbers. Running is about mental discipline. Wrestling and grappling is about posture, weight distribution, and managing space. Hunting is about scent control, patience, and observation. Racquetball is about controlling the middle of the court and your eye-hand coordination. Drawing is about perception and proportions. Freedom is about letting go, not control. Snowboarding is you get on the snowboard and you let gravity do what gravity does, and you're just along for the ride. You're not going to overpower the mountain. You're not going to overpower gravity. It's like emotional control. I don't control the emotions I have. I control how I manage the way I respond to those emotions. But once you learn to let go, once you learn to enjoy that experience of freedom, once you learn that you're really not driving the board, you're riding the board. Snowboarding doesn't sound that counterintuitive. You think, oh, that's the way this should work, because that's what it's designed to do. You get on this thing and there's no friction coefficient and gravity's going to pull you down the hill. You've just got to decide, am I going to fight the gravity, or am I going to just ride the gravity and control the direction that the gravity takes me? I can't control the gravity, but I control my response to the gravity. The counterintuitive nature of it is very, very similar to Christianity. See, Jesus said peace comes from within and is not dependent on external circumstances. He taught that riches did not consist of the things that we own or touch or spend, but in what we give and what we share. Jesus taught in order to be a person of significance, we weren't the people in charge, but we were the people who serve. Jesus taught us to treat people based on what they need, not what they deserve. And he taught us that the only way to live was to give up our lives. And the only way to be truly free was to become a slave. Pretty much the opposite of what everybody else thinks works, pretty much the opposite of what we might naturally choose to do when left to our own devices, pretty much the opposite of how we think it should work. And when we don't do it that way, when we try to do it according to the other set of rules, when we try to do it according to what we think our experience has taught us, when we don't do it that way, it pretty much explains why we fall. It explains why we can't understand why we fail. And it's probably the reason the fall seems so fast, so shocking, and so painful. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707, 615-371-8707, or you can go to 3Ws and a dot, worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.